Hi, good day everyone. So, these two topics here, movement and nutrition, are very short and simple topics that don't really require too much understanding, like, per se, me teaching you. It's really all about you reading the work and learning it. It's as simple as that. So, that's why I decided to do these two topics in a YouTube video instead of, using up an entire day of class. Okay? So let's get started. It's going to be a very short video. Okay, so let's do movement first. So all living organisms need to move to some extent to survive. Okay, so for example, we have growth movement, and we see this in plants. Okay, plants move by growing. Remember, they grow taller via their stems, and their leaves grow bigger, and they also grow deeper into the ground via their roots. Okay, so their roots will grow downwards. Now part movement, here we have part movement. This is displayed by a plant or a sedentary animal. A sedentary animal simply means an animal that doesn't move from place to place like us. Okay, animals just stay in one place. So part movements would, include something like the opening and closing of the leaves, petals, right? Sometimes there are plants that feed on insects, the trap plant, that's part movement. Okay, so that's two types of movements that occur in plants. The movement that occurs in animals are whole body movement or locomotion. Okay, that's what we call our movement, locomotion. So this is the movement of the entire body from one place to another. Okay, and locomotion is brought about by our muscles and our bones. Okay, so this is a picture of the human skeleton. It's not very important for you to draw anything like that. It's just for you to appreciate that we have a lot of bones, and attached to the bones we have muscles, which are not shown here. We'll see it in another picture. Okay, so our locomotion is brought about by our bones and muscles. So let's get some functions of our skeleton first of all. So the skeleton in a human has four main functions. Protection is by far number one. Okay, the bones are there to protect our organs. So let's take, for example, our rib cage. Our lungs and our heart are behind the rib cage. Okay, so the rib cage protects our lungs and heart, right? So support for the soft parts of the body. Okay, so you have your spine, you have your pelvis, your legs, they all support the body. Okay, keep it upright, right? That's why we could stand up straight. And obviously movement, this is the topic, right? Movement. So the skeleton along with muscles, they work together to provide movement. And this is something you may not have guessed in your first instance watching a skeleton, but remember, blood cells are manufactured in the bone marrow. Okay, so inside the bones we make blood cells. Okay, so that's important, the four functions of the human skeleton. So let's see how the skeleton helps us move. Well, we have joints. Okay, we have a knee joint, shoulder joint, elbow joint. We know all the joints. Okay, so joints are formed when two bones meet together, and there are three main types of joints. So the first one is the immovable joints, joints that don't actually help us with movement. They are actually more structural joints. Okay, so for example, in our brain, our skull, called the cranium, right? Your skull doesn't move around, but it's still made up of different bones, Okay, if you take a picture, if you Google a picture of the bones of your skull, it's actually made up of 4 bones. Okay, partially movable joints now. Okay, so slight movement, for example, our spine, the vertebrae in our spine, that's why we could bend forward and bend backward, but most of us can't actually turn our backs into a circle, as in to bend so far, right? We could bend a little bit, and that's a partially movable joint. And finally, we have movable joints, which actually help us really move. So these are all the notable joints, like a shoulder joint, elbow joint, knee joint. Okay, so these joints, they are separated by synovial fluid. Look at this joint here. Okay, this is your hip joint, right? This is your bone here, and this is your pelvis over here, and this is your hip. Okay, you have 2 of these. a left and a right. This blue stuff here is your synovial fluid. It helps reduce friction on the joint, okay, and helps the joint move smoothly. In older people who have hip pain, and some people might need hip replacements and stuff like that, it's because sometimes the synovial fluid gets too less, and the bones start rubbing against each other and cause pain. Also, the bone might fracture over here, right? And that's why they would need hip replacements, right? So this is an example of a ball and socket joint. You could kind of tell that this is the socket over here, and this round part here is acting as the ball, okay? So you can move very in like a wide area, okay? A lot of movement here, left, right, up, down. Ball and socket can move all over the place. Hinge joints, on the other hand, are like our elbow joints. Your elbow could really only move up and down. It can't move left and right, like your shoulder or like your hip. So your ball and socket joints are your shoulder and your hip joints. Your hinge joints are your elbow and your knees. If you realize your knees is work just like your elbow, except it's on your leg and your elbow is on your arm. And your shoulder and your hip are opposites as well. Your shoulders work just like your hips, except shoulder is upper, hip is lower, okay? So that's how the body works. Okay. Right. So let's take a look at how the joints actually move using muscles, okay? So when a muscle contracts, which means, like if you flex your arm and you make your bicep bigger, it exerts a pull. And you could tell, because if you extend your arm all the way and make your arm long, right? And now you want to show people your biceps muscle, what happens to your forearm? You have to pull it towards your body, right? So that's why we mean when a muscle contracts, it exerts a pull, okay? So to produce a movement, you need two muscles to produce movement. And these are known as antagonistic pairs of muscles. This means that you have your bicep and your tricep. Look at this picture here. This is showing the antagonistic movement. This is your bicep. This is your tricep. When you want to pull your forearm up, like if you want to pull your forearm this way, your bicep needs to contract, but your tricep needs to relax. You see how small the tricep gets? Now, when you want to pick up something off the ground, like if you want to reach for something and move your arm downwards, your bicep needs to relax and your triceps needs to contract. So they move oppositely according to what you want to do. That's what we mean by antagonistic muscles. Okay? So keep that in mind. And then finally, we need to understand the importance of movement in animals. Why do we get to move all over the place while plants have to stay? Okay? Because animals need to search for food. Plants make their own food. They don't need to search for food. Okay, but we, plants and animals, need to search for our food. Also, animals reproduce by sexual reproduction. So we need to search for a mate. You can't expect somebody to come up to you just like that, right? You have to go out and search for a mate. Also, some animals have predators, and also the predators need to move to search for their prey, which is their food, right? As in the first example here. So prey need to be able to move to escape predators, okay? And then finally, animals move to distribute their offspring. Remember, plants, when they are pollinated by either wind or insects, the insects and the wind do the movement for them. Okay, but animals need to distribute the offspring all over, because the goal of our life is to conquer more and more areas. So you as an animal can't just keep making children in one little area. You want to spread out your children into a wider territory and conquer more territory. Okay, that's what we mean by distributing the offspring. Okay, and we have some minor importance as well to avoid overcrowding. That's just like distributing your offspring, right? You don't want 100 of your offspring in the same area. Okay, you need to avoid waste products as well. You don't want to be living in the same place where you're excreting as an animal, right? You would go and excrete your waste somewhere else. Okay, and also if environmental conditions become harsh, like if there's a drought or something, you as an animal need to find water and move somewhere else. Okay, so you could think about all of these. Very simple to learn, right? Very simple work. You just need to learn it, and then when the question asks it in the exam, you could just write it down and be happy about that. And that's really all there is to movement, okay? So let's get into nutrition now, okay? So all living organisms need food. We know this, okay? So there are two types of nutrition, two types of making food. The first type is autotrophic. And we've heard about this in the first class when we did trophic levels, right? Autotrophic is really plants making their own food. Only plants could be autotrophs, right? Everything else has to be a heterotroph, so heterotrophic nutrition. So autotrophic nutrition occurs in plants and some bacteria as well, right? So they use compounds found in the earth, right, like water, carbon dioxide, to make their own food via photosynthesis. But we won't be getting into photosynthesis in this class. We'll have a separate class for this big topic of photosynthesis. We really want to focus on nutrition in animals today, okay? So let's skip ahead to heterotrophic nutrition. So heterotrophic nutrition will occur in animals, right? So they obtain ready-made food from the plants or from other animals if you are a big predator, okay? So these are three types of nutrition here, right? So the holozoic nutrition, very big, very fancy word. This is the most popular type of nutrition that occurs in animals, right? So the animals consume other organisms. Very simple. We eat and we get food from that. And that's holozoic nutrition. Okay? Saprophytic nutrition occurs in only fungi and bacteria. So that doesn't apply to a regular animal. Okay? These are the decomposers, right? So we call them saprophytes, right? Saprophytic nutrition, fungi and bacteria, decomposers. And finally, we have parasitic nutrition, which is the same as in our first class when we did the three types of relationships, right? So parasitic nutrition will occur in those in parasites, okay, who live off the host organism. Parasitic nutrition. So holozoic is the typical nutrition of an animal, okay, by eating another. Right. So there are 5 processes in heterotrophic nutrition. Ingestion, where you actually eat the food. Digestion, where your body breaks down the food into simpler substances that it could use. So for example, it will break down stuff into proteins, fats, right? Things like that. And then absorption now is where the body can absorb the broken down food to be carried about in the blood to get to where it needs to go. And it does this by assimilation. Now we heard the word assimilation already in the nitrogen cycle, where the plants absorbs the nitrates from the soil, and assimilation works the same way in our body. Okay, the body will use the food molecules that we digested for its survival. Okay, and then finally we have egestion or defecation, right? This is when you excrete waste. Okay, so urine, feces, things like that, right? So that's the 5 processes of heterotrophic nutrition. Very simple to learn. So let's look at our diet now. This is quite an important topic and it's overlooked by many, but we need to know about it, okay? So what is diet? Diet is anything that you eat. If you eat, fried chicken every day, that is your diet. If you only eat vegetables every day, that is your diet. However, we need to have a balanced diet. We need to have a diet rich in every major food group, okay? So we must consume a balanced diet every single day. And what does a balanced diet consist of? Carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, vitamins, minerals, water, and roughage. Roughage is basically fiber. Okay, we learned about fiber just now. Fiber is basically food that cannot be digested, but it helps keep constipation away, right? So, and it also prevents against cancer and stuff like that, and we learned about that just now. Okay, so we need the correct proportions of all of these food groups here. And how many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7. Okay, so that's important there. So let's take a look at the carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Okay, lipids are basically fats. Okay, so these are three very main portions of our meal, and they are required in large amounts, right? So when you say something large, we say it's macro. So these are the macronutrients, right? The others are micronutrients, right? They are needed in relatively small amounts. So let's take a look at carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are found in sweet or starchy foods. So the sweet foods are, things that your cake, ice cream, jam, but fruits are very healthy sources of sweets. They contain sugar, right? Also, they are found in starchy foods like rice, pasta, macaroni, bread, potatoes as well, right? So their main function is to provide energy. And this figure here is very important. 17 kilojoules per gram. So every gram of carbohydrates has 17 kilojoules of energy, right? That's an important figure to remember. They are also important in storage, okay? So glycogen granules, they store carbohydrates in animal cells, and starch stores carbohydrates in plant cells. That's why we could get it from starchy foods, right? Always remember that. Plant cells have starch. That's where we get starchy foods from. Right. Proteins, on the other hand, we find it in other animals, right? So fish, meat, where we could also find it in eggs, cheese, milk, and stuff like that. Now, important vegetables that have proteins: beans, nuts, also things like broccoli, right? Broccoli has a lot of protein. So what are the functions of proteins? Well, to make new cells, we can't grow without protein. Enzymes are proteins. Hormones are proteins. The antibodies that fight disease made by our white blood cells, they are also proteins. And also, proteins can actually provide energy as well. The same amount like carbohydrates. 1 gram, 17 kilojoules of energy for proteins. However, they are only used when carbohydrates energy and the lipid energy have been used up. So these are the last source of energy when we are starving and when we can't find food and things, like if you get locked up and you can't eat and things after like a whole week and your carbohydrates and lipids get used up, only then does your body turn to your proteins for energy. Why does it wait for protein to use last? Because proteins have all of these other functions here, right? Look how many things protein does. So we want to leave proteins to do their things. We don't want energy from proteins, ideally, okay? We can get energy now from lipids. So lipids are fats, right? So you get oily food, butter, cheese, vegetable oils, fatty meats like fried chicken. All those things have lipids in them, right? Now, what are lipids used for? What are fats used for? Well, you may not know this, but your cell membranes on your cells, they are made up of lipids, okay? Also, lipids provide energy, but look at the amount of energy. Every gram, 39 kilojoules. So way more energy than the carbohydrates and the proteins. But why is the carbohydrate preferred as the main energy source? The metabolism to use up the lipids are more complex, right? And it takes longer to supply the energy to the body. So carbohydrates can give energy to the body rapidly when your body needs it. Lipids take a longer time to give us energy. That's why we start feeling tired if we're trying to exert ourselves after we don't eat for a while. It's not because we don't have any energy, it's because the fats that the body is trying to use now is taking a lot more time to give us the energy. So we'll feel more tired. However, the other main uses of fats are for storage. We store energy as fat. That's why when we eat a lot, we get fatter, right? And for insulation. So fat is a good heat insulator. So if the fatter somebody is, the warmer they are going to feel, right? Because it retains your body heat very well, right? You wouldn't lose your body heat. For example, in very cold countries, The people like to remain a little fat because they will keep warmer that way. They will not lose as much heat. Okay, so fats are good insulators. So that's the function of our macronutrients. Keep in mind these values, okay? 17, 17, 39. Okay? Let's move on to the vitamins now, the micronutrients. So you have heard about these vitamins, vitamin A, B, C, D, go all the way down the alphabet, right? But we are only going to do vitamin A to D, right? It doesn't make sense for me to recite this table for you. All you need to know is that you need to know a couple examples of sources of each vitamin. So you need to know where you could find vitamin A, for example. Then you need to know the functions of each vitamin. So you need to know that vitamin A helps in night vision, it helps strengthen the immune system, and it helps keep our skin very healthy. And finally, you also need to know what will happen to the body if it doesn't get enough of each vitamin. So for example, vitamin A, if it helps keep the skin healthy, obviously you're going to have very dry, unhealthy skin. Okay? Okay, so it doesn't make sense for me to recite this table for you. You just need to read it and retain the main information, your source, your function, and your efficiency. Okay? And in the same vein, we have minerals. Okay, minerals are micronutrients as well. So we need to learn the main minerals, your calcium, phosphorus go down. And again, you need to know where you get them, what their functions are, and what happens if you don't have enough deficiency. Okay, I need to learn the names of these diseases. Okay, rickets, osteoporosis, anemia, cretinism. All of these are very important words, very important diseases that you need to learn about, right? I can't help you learn them because it's just simply something you need to read, something you need to learn. Okay, and this is a picture of goiter. This is another disease. That's how it's spelled, goiter, right? And this is when you have an iodine deficiency. If you go up on the table here by iodine, you would see goiter, right? Your neck becomes swollen because of your thyroid gland. You actually have a thyroid gland in your neck that is responsible for making some hormones, and if you don't have iodine, it will begin to swell very, very large like this, right? I'm sure most of you know someone who has had some form of neck surgery or thyroid surgery to remove part or all of the thyroid gland. Okay, that's a very common condition, you know. So, right, that's what we call goiter. Okay, and this is just some information on the other things that we would not have mentioned. So water, we can't put it in a table. Water is just a component, is essential for life. Okay, we can't survive without water. So these are some functions of water in life. Okay, water is a very good solvent. So it could dissolve lots of chemicals, any kind of substances that need to be transported. Okay, and it also dissolves waste substances. So that's how waste from cells like urea, carbon dioxide can be transported around the body so they can be excreted. Okay, so water is a very good solvent. Okay, also water can cool the body via sweat. When we sweat and the sweat evaporates, we feel cool. Okay, and that keeps the temperature under control. And lastly, in the diet, we have our fiber or the roughage. Okay, so as we said before, roughage or fiber cannot be digested. What it is, it's found in cellulose from plant cell walls. So when we eat vegetables, we get fiber, and that's why vegetables are so important in our diet. Okay, so it adds bulk to the food, which helps peristalsis. We don't worry about this big word. In our next class, when we do the gastrointestinal system, we'll learn a lot more about peristalsis. Okay, but it helps prevent constipation and reduces the risk of colon cancer. Colon cancer is a very common cancer, okay, and very deadly. Okay, if you remember Chadwick Boseman, he died of colon cancer. Okay, so that's very important to remember. All right. And so the final thing we'll be doing today is malnutrition and some diseases associated with a poor diet. Okay, so malnutrition, this is caused by eating a certain diet that is deficient in certain nutrients. Okay, so it's either they are too much of something or too little of something. So if we eat too little food to meet the body's energy requirements, then our fat will and glycogen that we use to store carbohydrates and fats will be used up, okay? So when you use up your fat, you're going to experience weight loss, okay? And you will also have insufficient energy, because remember, when you use up the fats take a longer time to process the energy, okay? So there'll be insufficient energy for daily activities. So in extreme cases, when there are no more fats and no more carbohydrates to use, remember, the body will start to use proteins, and when this happens, it's called marasmus. Okay, see this word here? Marasmus. And this is where the body starts to waste away, your muscles start to decrease. You'll just look very, very malnourished, okay? Now, if too much food is eaten, then too much will be stored as fat, right? And it'll be stored as fat deposits in the skin and around your organs, okay? So this results in people becoming overweight, obese, and then could lead to certain diseases, okay? So we call these diseases non-communicable diseases. Communicable, when you're talking about diseases, means something that could spread from person to person, like COVID, right? That's a communicable disease. Non-communicable disease is brought about by poor nutrition, is brought about by things that we do, or it could be something like cancer, okay? Things that cannot spread. So diabetes, very, very prominent. Maybe 1 in every 4 people have, or 1 in every 5 people have diabetes in the Caribbean. Hypertension, even worse. 1 in every 3 or 1 in every 4 people, adults have hypertension in the Caribbean. And finally, heart disease, which is a product of, hypertension and fat deposits, okay? Heart disease. So now, if certain nutrients or minerals are consumed in the wrong proportions, this could also lead to malnutrition, not just eating too much or too little food. So there's something called kwashiorkor in children. When you don't eat enough protein, especially, you will have kwashiorkor, okay? And then obviously we could go back in our table and look for the consumption of too little bit of vitamins and minerals as well, right? So finally, let's look at the diet and treatment of disease, okay? So deficiency diseases such as the rickets, scurvy, anemia, all we need to do is to make sure we have a diet rich in the vitamins and minerals that we need to prevent these things from happening, okay? So we need to have a diet rich in the appropriate amounts of vitamins and nutrients. Diabetes, we could control diabetes by eating a healthy, balanced diet with little bit of sugar, okay? Low in sugar we need. And we need high dietary fibers, like from fruits and vegetables, etc. Okay? So we definitely need to avoid added sugar when you are diabetic, right? Hypertension now can be controlled eating a diet low in fats and salt. Okay, salt raises the blood pressure, and fats could lead to build up in the arteries, okay, and that will also increase your blood pressure. And we did this in past classes, okay, so we understand how hypertension or high blood pressure works. And really, that's all there is for this class. It was a very, very short class because it's too short and easy topics. You just need to learn the stuff in the tables and make sure and learn off everything, and then you'll be fine for the exam. There's nothing really to understand here. Anything that there was to understand, I explained it here. So if you want, you could go back through the video and look at the hard parts that were hard for you. And as usual, if you have any questions, you could just run them through me on WhatsApp. Alright? So thank you for listening, everybody.